Yeah, hi guys. This is Ravi here, back with a chess video, and this game is about King's Indian Defense, where I play as a black player. And if you see the ratings of the player here, my rating is 2260 approximate, and my opponent's rating is 2350 almost. So this game is about King's Indian Defense, and I want to show you this game because this is a very clean game, a very simple way of playing the King's Indian Defense. I would definitely believe that once you look at this game, you would fall in love with the King's Indian Defense. Some of the key moves have also been mentioned very clearly, and Black's attack here is very strong, and the initiative of Black, it keeps going. Like, white doesn't have any initiative in the entire game. So without wasting any further time, let's go and have a look at the game. D4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4. Okay, castle. Okay, so many players here, instead of castle, they play the d6 move so that they can encounter this e5 move along with the this d6 move. So, but I am not afraid of the e5 move. I know I can, face the e5 move with the knight to e8. So, like I give a castling. Okay, bishop d3. Okay, this is not the most common played move in the King's Indian as a white. People generally go for knight to f3, or like they play h3, something like that, or play f3, which is the same-ish variation of the King's Indian. Okay, so I play the move d6, which is the most common move here, the signature move of King's Indian. Knight g to e2, knight to c6. Okay, a3. A3 is not the most common made move here. So looking at the moves of my opponent, I could easily make out that my opponent is not that much familiar with the King's Indian defense moves. So you see the rating of the opponent is 2348, which is a very much high rated. So, but he doesn't have a total knowledge of the KID. Okay, so as the game progresses, you would see that he lacks the basic plans as white. Okay, okay, e5 move is generally played, so that white can take the d5 square with his pawn. And after you play the d5 move, white here, black is shown as to play the knight to knight e4, sorry, knight to d4, but I take my knight back because I don't want that this pawn to get exchanged, because if the e5 pawn is being coming to d4, it means that if I put my knight on knight to d4, and if this knight on just e2 takes my knight, then I have to take with my e pawn, and then the essence of King's Indian defense would get lost, because this pawn on e5 is very much required, so that in future when black plays the move f5, so this e5 and f5 moves, they start an initiative, they start a kingside attack towards the white king. So this e5 pawn is very much required in the King's Indian. Okay, I move to knight to e7, and then castle on the king side. I move the knight to e8 because I want to play the move f5. Okay, okay. Now white plays b4 move. Now why does he play this move b4? Because white wants to push c5 and he wants to attack on the queen side. So the basic plan for white is in the King's Indian is to attack on the queen side. Okay, so I don't allow his plan further. I play the move a5. Now why a5? Now here, if let's say if white right now likes to play the move c5, I'll be taking this pawn with this b4 pawn with my a5 pawn, and white would not be able to capture because then my rook is aligned with his rook, so I'll be able to capture his rook. So, and white should not even push this pawn, this b4 pawn to b5, because if the b4 pawn is being pushed to b5, then white's attack will get freezed somewhat. Because if you see most of the games in the King's Indian, what happens is that white tries to attack this pawn on d6, he pushes this move here, c5, and then he exchanges the pawn with the d6. The knight comes to b5, and the rook comes on the c file. The bishop is on the e3, and white tries to give a fork on this c7 square. But here, white is not able to play this plan, because if you see the game, you would understand that I don't allow this plan to happen. And white's attack also comes very fast. So if you see here, my plan as a black player, like I have not been able to push any of the pawns ahead. Bishop to d2, so that like if I take this pawn, and white will be able to take this pawn. And if I exchange my rooks, then the queen can come and take my rook. Okay, f5. This is the key move in the King's Indian as a black, and white plays c5. Okay, now I play then f4, because I want to extend my pawns on the king side. White stops it further with f3, and then g5. So these moves are quite like very like kind of a signature moves in the King's Indian. And then okay, white plays h3, so that like I don't push my pawn even further, but I play then h5, h3, and then h5, because I want to break through on the g4 square. So I'm trying my best to occupy the g4 square. Okay, now this move, if you see right now, I have like made on this stockfish. If you see here, white wastes a lot of time. So this knight again comes to knight to c1. Like this is definitely, I will say, this move wastes a lot of time, because white wants to take a lot of time and then come to makes his knight to come to knight to b3, and then he wants to capture my pawn on the a5. He wants to capture my pawn on the a5. But like I will say that it is a lot of time which gets wasted. I give my knight to f6. Knight, when the knight comes to b3, I exchange the pawns. And when he takes it, I take it, and white takes back with the knight. So see, the knight comes to c1, then b3, and then to a1. So in the middle game, white is on the knight is on a1. So it means that the knight is at the corner. It's not even at the rim. It is only occupying two squares here right now. This knight is not doing anything, with a complete waste of time, I would say. Okay, so right now, before doing the break on g5, I make a very key move, and one of the most important moves. I would say this move is, in my knowledge, is being invented by Kasparov, and this move, Rook f7, is a very much offensive and a very defensive move. Now, why it is an offensive move? Because the Rook, what of all, like it gets lifted, and it swings across the G files and the H files. So when once black breaks through on the G file with the pawn, the H file will, like, or the G file, like it will get opened or semi-open, and this rook can be used as an offensive piece. And if white tries to break on the c7 square, this rook, it can protect any of the, like, the seventh square rank, and it can help black, so that so that none of the knights can come through and make a kind of a fork. So this rook is very much important move in the King's Indian defense. I want you guys to remember this move, so that you can like play it accordingly at the right time. Okay, again the knight comes to e2. Okay, bishop to f8, and this is also a very important move in the King's Indian. The bishop leaves the g7 square and makes the way for the rook, so that it can come on the g7 or on the a7. And also this bishop here, it protects the d6 square, because white is going to break through on the d6 square. Once this c5 and d6 pawns, they get exchanged, white will have a semi-open like c file, and white's main plan is to attack here. But here in this case, the white's rook on the white's queenside rook, it gets exchanged. So the attack is not very much there, I would say. Okay, the queen tries to come on the king side, but it doesn't happen like that. I make this knight to come to g6, so that if I give this move to g4, from g5 to g4, the queen can suddenly come to this square on h4, which I don't want that to happen. So I first of all move my knight to g6 so that it can occupy the h4 square and doesn't allow the white queen to come further. And it makes my queen, if you see in the future, that my queen will be able to come on the queen side. Okay, now white clears the c4 c file, and I give my bishop so that my bishop will get more active compared to his pieces, his bishop. Okay, knight comes here, knight comes to b3. So if you see, white makes a lot of knight moves, but it doesn't become fruitful. Okay, now I try to break through on the this g file. I give the move g4. F takes g4, h takes g4, h takes g4, and knight takes g4. So once all the, like if you see the pawns have been exchanged, it makes way for my pieces. Black cannot come to the queen side that much because my pawn on this f4 square and this e5 square restricts a lot of activity for the white pieces. Okay, now white comes on the c5 square. If you see right now the this evaluation of the stockfish, it is minus 6.7. That means black is very much winning here. White doesn't have a plan at all. White is just playing some moves in order to play something, but white doesn't have a plan yet. Okay, so if you see right now my queen, it comes on the g5 square because I want to come to the h5 and then checkmate white king on the h2 square. This is my plan. White tries to stop the plan, rook to f3, because right now if I cannot go to this queen to h5 because rook would then come to h3. So what I do is that the better move would have been to make this knight to come on this h4 square so that it can attack the white rook and it can also push this pawn. But no, I don't play this move because it was a very much short on time. I instead give my knight to e3. Bishop takes e3 and then f takes e3. It even clears more pieces for it, clears more squares for my pieces. And if you see right now, white plays rook to g3 to attack my queen. I play bishop to g4. And if you see here, then white tries to attack my queen with move knight to e6, and I move my queen to h5. And then again, if you see here, the knight goes to c1. I don't know what is it all about. This guy is having a 2, 3, 4, 8 rating, so I believe that this is a very odd move and ugly move. And right now, if you see, a computer is showing that the stockfish is showing that the rook should move here. So if you see the original purpose of the move, the rook move, which I gave a few moves back, rook to f7, it can swing to the g file or on the h file accordingly, and I make rook h7. Okay, in vain. Now this my opponent makes a blunder and he takes my bishop. And if you see queen to h1, it becomes a checkmate. So even if even if you see the computer is showing that if this queen would have taken this pawn on this e3 square, I would have won the game. And that's a pure calculation. I think I just leave it to you guys. You guys can make out the calculation by yourself. I hope you like this video. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye bye.